Hello, everyone. On Tuesday morning, after almost 16 months since the trial began, Kuala Lumpur High Court sentenced Malaysia's ex-president Najib Razak to 12 years in prison. He has been found guilty of several charges in his first trial linked to the multi-billion-dollar 1MDB scandal. Clare Rewcastle-Brown is an investigative journalist and founder of the Sarawak Report. She wrote about what might be called the world's biggest fraud and robbery. And now she's my guest, and we will be talking about her experience related to uncovering this huge scandal, how it affected her reporting, and about the idea behind establishing the Sarawak Report as well. Welcome, Ms. Rewcastle-Brown.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
I would like to start with the basics, very basics. I think you are the best person that we can ask about this. What is the 1MDB scandal in a nutshell? Yes, on Friday we saw that Najib was sentenced to 12 years in prison, but there is a much longer backstory, and many others involved in this story, and the timeline of the story goes way back, quite long. I would love to hear it from you.
Well, I think one of the reasons why the 1MDB scandal is interesting for people all over the world, like you and me, outside of Malaysia, is because it symbolizes a global problem. It symbolizes what's going wrong in very many countries. This is the biggest single theft that the US Department of Justice has ever investigated, and it was investigated in different countries all over the world where the money did end up. But to me, it symbolizes many other thefts that are probably as big, could be bigger, that haven't yet been discovered. Thefts that are usually carried out because of the abuse of power by people all over the world, by politicians, by people who have control of their countries and who are willing to cheat the people in their own countries. 1MDB was, it was a vehicle to enable the people in power in Malaysia to cheat the people of their own countries, to raid public money. The Prime Minister decided soon after becoming Prime Minister in 2009 to set up what he called a development fund. And that sounded great. That sounded as if it was all for making money to help, you know, children and women and poor people improve their lives. But of course, that wasn't really the purpose, as I was to discover. This development fund set about borrowing billions of dollars, and then instead of putting that money into projects for Malaysia, it invested it in fake projects around the world, which were just a front so that they could steal the money. After I started looking into this and started looking into how they stole the money, I found out a lot about our financial systems and the way our global finances work that make it possible for these sorts of people to steal money in this way. We have a massive system, an offshore system, where money can be lost behind bogus shell companies with bank accounts in Britain, America, all over the world, Singapore, where these companies, these anonymous companies, can then hide their billions of dollars. And the entire theft was facilitated by an army of professional people, lawyers, accountants, big accountancy firms, big law firms, big banks. So I had a real adventure over a number of years, bit by bit, exposing all these powerful people, all these professional people, most of them from Britain, America, Switzerland, but also China has become very involved in this story, people from all over the world. And it's a story about exploiting the vulnerable people, the exploitation of those people by the rich and powerful. So I hope by exposing it, and I hope by proving at last in his own court of law that the Prime Minister of Malaysia was indeed guilty after years of denying it, we may be able to open people's eyes and deter future such.
How did you get involved? I mean, I know you were provided with some papers related to the issue, but how how did you decide that, okay, I have to take the step and have to go look into this deeper and deeper and deeper?
Well, because I suppose that the straight answer is that this is where I came from. I look like a British journalist getting involved in a scandal on the other side of the world, but actually I was born in Malaysia. So I cared about it. It was a part of my life, a part of my background, and I was aware. I knew that terrible things were happening there, that's where every good story really begins. I began on the ground. I began reporting because not for money actually, because these are the stories people don't look at. Most of the journalists in the world are not wasting their time reporting on the poor people, the deprived people. They're reporting on the exciting things that rich and powerful people are doing. It's just the way it is. But the consequences of the corruption in Malaysia was ruining millions of people's lives, as it does all over the world. And what I was reporting on was the destruction of the rainforests of Borneo, which are a precious, it's like the Amazon. It's the oldest rainforest in the world, one of the most precious natural regions on Earth. And I knew about this, and I knew about the people who lived there, who had, for hundreds of thousands of years, had looked after their jungle that was now being destroyed, and they were being forced into desperate poverty and starvation. And it was looking at that caused me to ask why is this happening? Why destroy this rainforest? Why not look after it better? And the answer was that a few people wanted to get very, very rich very, very quickly, and they didn't care. They didn't care. So they were destroying it, and it was corruption. It was political corruption. So I had been looking at a lot of these examples. I had exposed a number of people in Malaysia for corruption. And, I want to see them punished too. It was in the course of that I noticed that there was this scandal developing with this new prime minister and his slush fund, 1MDB. And actually, I knew a lot about the background. I knew a lot of people were wondering, why has he borrowed so many billions of dollars? Why is it that the reports aren't coming in? There are big accountancy companies. KPMG, for example, was one of a number of big accountancy companies. They weren't producing the annual reports. And opposition politicians were saying, what's happened to the money? Why are we not getting these reports? What's going on? Where did the money go? I actually realized that I could bring the answer when in 2014, at the beginning of 2014, a new film hit Hollywood with Leo DiCaprio as the star. It was a $100 million movie that we all know about, The Wolf of Wall Street. And it was all about people who steal money and what fun they have with the money, okay? And I started to realize that actually the people who made the movie were 10 times worse than the people in the movie. They made a movie about themselves, I realized. And I realized this because the producer of the movie was a nobody. He was in his 30s. He was no one. He had not much money. The one thing he had was he was the son of the Malaysian Prime Minister. And his business partner, his friend that I could see in all the pictures of the premiere of the movies, was the person that was known to be the advisor of the Prime Minister, a young man who was the advisor of the Prime Minister on the fund. So I wrote an article. I did a lot of research, and I wrote an article saying, could there be any connection between the missing billions from the Development Fund of Malaysia and the mysterious $100 million movie that the son of the Prime Minister of Malaysia has just found the money to make? And of course, that was the beginning. I had a big reaction, angry lawyers, attacks, criticism. But I just said, this is the sorts of question this is what journalists are for. We give me the answer. This is an obvious question. You're spending all this money. Where did you get it? Because you are the son of the Prime Minister of Malaysia. And I then also got lots of feedback from Hollywood. I started to get information about other things that this young man had, fancy mansions in Beverly Hills, flats in New York, and it all came out eventually. Jets, fleets of cars. I started to I started to look into the lifestyles of these people. And it was a story on its own. They were living an outrageous life and they couldn't explain the money. And I started bit by bit, as a journalist did, over the next few months, proving that money was going from 1MDB into the business projects of these guys. And eventually I found that there was someone who had been in business with them, who had information. One of the first front company was called Petra Saudi. It had a Saudi Arabian prince as one of its shareholders. And I heard that there was one of their partners who had started to realize just how corrupt the company was, what it was doing. It was basically a front to steal the money from 1MDB. And after a lot of persuading, I got him to agree to provide me and another news organization who paid him in the end with the data that told us exactly how they had stolen the money through their company. And that was the first big story. I was able to prove that out of the first $1 billion that had gone into a supposed joint venture with 1MDB, 700 million had been stolen by this character, Joe Low, who was the partner of the Prime Minister. And it began from there. I had many more people came forward with secret information. It took about 3 years for me to, and I'm still, just last month, I exposed a major aspect of this scandal, another well over 1.5 billion that went through Kuwait, through a royally connected people in Kuwait. And that's a whole new scandal linked to 1MDB that I exposed. And it's a long story with many details. What brings it all together is, as I said, it is the fact that at the moment, the lack of transparency, the lack of political will to control a financial system that is dominated by Europe and America is allowing this sort of money laundering to go on. Despite all the rules we've brought in, we're not doing the major thing we need to do, which is bring the offshore system under control and demand greater transparency. But China too has been a major player in this. China was a major corrupting force in this, and much of the money was enabled by Chinese state companies as part of China's politics to take economic control over countries like Malaysia through their expansionist policies and the Belt and Road Program. So it's a global problem that needs to be recognized globally and tackled globally.
You established the Sarawak report in 2010, if I'm right. I also wonder the idea of establishing this platform, and what were your motives, because, and also I might ask your fears as well, because it's not so easy to take that step, but it still stands today and keeps reporting on many other issues related to country or global issues as well. So I also wonder about how you came up with the idea and how that journey went with the Sarawak report.
Well, as I say, I think it's calculated that $4.5 billion was stolen from 1MDB, which is a lot. It's the biggest case that the American government has investigated. On the other hand, the money stolen from the people of Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, which I've also been looking at, the same companies are involved. There are a very few number of Chinese companies mainly involved in this. Is many times greater. Billions and billions have been stolen from the people of these countries. So it's a massive crime. I'm a journalist. It's a big story. So on that basis alone, you know, why no one else was going after it. I've spent my life writing about corruption, crime, That's my area of journalism. And so what bigger story could I set my target on? But there's, of course, a more important reason than that. Not only the tragedy that we shouldn't turn our blind eye to of Indigenous people all around the world who are being treated perniciously, deprived of their lands, their lives, exploited, deprived of an ability to have a decent life. Because if their leaders had used their money wisely, used their resources wisely and generously towards their own people, then you would have seen so much less suffering. And all you see in these countries is suffering. So someone has to say something. And I hope that anyone who goes into journalism has that conscience, is above all motivated to bring to light, to speak up for the people who are impoverished and have not the power to, or the opportunity to hear their voice, to have their voices heard. So of course, that's the important thing. That was, to expose what was going on. And you hope that in the process of doing that, in the process of telling people, no, you can't get away with that. Sorry, you're breaking the rules, and don't do it. Don't break the rules, because there will be penalties. Now, if people think they can break the rules and take, and if they don't do it, someone else will do it because there's no penalty, then you're going to find people who will do it. But if you say, no, we know, we're going to find out, this person gets punished, that prime minister's going to jail, at least then you push back against that. So that's all I was doing. I decided that, one person does what they can and other people will do what they can. And if we work together, and if every one of us makes a stand and says, I've seen something that's wrong, and stands up against it, we will have a better world rather than a worse world. I'm very encouraged. There are a lot of young people who are really interested in getting back into journalism. I started as a young person. There were a lot of idealistic young people getting into journalism. The last few decades have not been good for journalism. I think the wealthy, the powerful are very aware how dangerous journalists are to their interests. And a lot of work, time, bullying, monopolizing has gone into controlling journalism, controlling the message that the public receive, disguising the fact that we're controlled, managing our emotions, but, absolutely silencing the sort of journalism that I try to do. Over the years, my colleagues who were like me, campaigning investigative journalists, finding it harder and harder to feed their families, to be able to do their jobs, or indeed to be able to protect themselves from legal pushback, which of course, the legal pushback is designed to make it very expensive and dangerous financially for anyone, a newspaper, or indeed the journalists themselves. I've had a lot of people try to destroy me financially. I mean, there's not much to destroy, but to ruin my life and take my house and all the rest, to shut me up. And every journalist faces that. And we need to look at protecting journalists in the law better than we do. So we need to change the landscape. We need to understand what's going on. The invention of the internet was my breakthrough. I could see that suddenly it gave me a chance to have a voice in the same way as if I commanded a newspaper. I said, right, okay, let's see who's interested in listening to me. I will start my blog, Sarawak Report. Maybe one person will listen to me, maybe more. I don't care. I will do what I did for newspapers, but I will do the stories I want to do, and we'll see who listens. And wow, I've got a lot of followers. So that was, but of course now you're seeing deliberate, powerful, heavily funded attempts to get back control of the internet, to, I guess you call it fake news, to command the internet, to deceive people through the internet. And this has become another issue of our times, as the same forces attempt to get control again of the message, of the communication network. So I do hope that we can encourage journalism again, encourage young people to be idealistic again about journalism, and to ensure that there are livings to be made in journalism.
And after all this hard work you put into it, carrying on the investigation with the 1MDB scandal, now we received news that Najib was sentenced into prison, but considering many other actors that we talked about all over the world, you also mentioned how big of a problem actually this is. Do you think that justice has been made, or do you have the hope that with this case at least it will go on and further?
Well, I don't think Najib ever imagined that anyone would expose him. Otherwise, he'd have been more careful, to be honest. I think he thought he had it. He had all the power. He had all the control. Everybody was, he had total control of the Malaysian media. Everybody was bowing to him. He thought he could get away with it, which is why he took so few precautions, and why it was quite easy to see what he'd done. And even when I exposed him, he still thinks that he can wage, that he can use power and money to twist the system so that he will not go to jail. He thinks that he can force his way through the system because he's special, isn't he? He's above the law. He's the lawmaker. We're the ones who have to obey the laws he makes. He has put many people, he has intimidated the media as a prime minister. He has put many people in jail. He has prosecuted people for contempt, for criticizing the legal system that he was using to terrorize his enemies. And yet yesterday he came out onto the court steps, still not put in prison, to say he's appealing. And he himself criticized the judge. He himself claimed that he had made Malaysia more liberal and that he had been a kind, liberal man in charge, when in fact he had terrorized anyone who criticized him. And he set about criticizing the judgment, criticizing the judge, making plain that he thought it was a political judgment and not a judgment based on the facts. And that's what he'll do. He will try to cause political chaos now, and to buy support, create polarization between different ethnic groups in his country, anything to get him off the hook. I'm afraid that's what people in his position often try to do. And I think that we need to see this man realize that he can't get away with it, because that will be a lesson for others. So eventually, Malaysia needs to get this man in jail as a lesson to others.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck with all your work.
Thank you, and thank you all for watching us. Stay tuned for more content from Medyascope.